Welcome to Guided. I'm your host, Jodi Reynosa, helping you navigate your divine journey. And with me today is Geoff Thompson. Geoff, welcome to Guided.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I am so excited. As I was just telling you before the show, I was enthralled in your book last night up to the wee hours of the morning. It's absolutely fantastic. There's so much to it. It's just packed with so much wisdom. And that is the Divine CEO. Now, is it out or can you pre-order it?
You can pre-order it. It's out on the 31st of July.
Yes, so it's coming right up.
Yeah,
so
it's about a week time.
Yes, it's so exciting. Before we go on, let me just tell you a little bit about Geoff. He is a phenomenal person. He has so much experience, and he is, well, let me just start with the fact that he is a martial artist. He's a writer. He has actually taught with Chuck Norris. Is that right?
Yeah, he invited me over to Las Vegas twice to teach for his group.
That's
very
amazing.
Lovely. Very strange. In him telling you stories about when Bruce Lee used to ring him up and say, do you want to come round to do a bit of sparring? So it was lovely. It was lovely to sit with Chuck Norris and hear those stories.
That's so fun. That is so fun. And he's won a number of British Academy of Film and Television Awards. He's written about 40 books, screenplays, short films. I mean, you name it, his feature films. His bio is lengthy, so you need to go and actually read it. There's a Wikipedia. There's just before his book, The Divine CEO, there's numerous accolades, and it's amazing. So if I just go to the beginning of your book, Geoff, and I just see some of your first book was Watch My Back, and that was detailing your experience as the doorman in Coventry for over a decade. And that became the Sunday Times best-selling autobiography. And in 2008, it was adapted into a screenplay. So that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, it was made into a short film and then into a feature film.
Wow. Let's start with that, because that kind of talks about your journey with facing fear.
Yeah.
And, you know, this show, Guided, talks about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And so many people feel at some point in their life guided to do something else. They are on one trajectory in their life, and then all of a sudden something hits them, whether it's spirit or they have this epiphany, and then they're just like, nope, I'm doing something else.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. I suffered with depression as a younger guy. I wanted to change the world, but I didn't really have the discipline to change my socks every day. You know, I just hadn't built the infrastructure. The depressions used to wipe me out. And on one particular depression, this would have been my first direct communication with my soul. I felt an anger rise up. Bearing in mind, I was waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat. My wife would be asleep in bed next to me. My children asleep in the other room. And I was lonely, sad. I was suffering. And it was just that feeling of, how can I get through another day? It's a long day. And I was so distraught because I'd been to the doctors. I'd asked people for advice. I'd read books. The doctor gave me tablets, which wasn't the answer for me. I didn't want something that I had to take which would mean it would all come back again the moment I stopped taking the tablets.
Like a Band-Aid.
I did try to take the tablets, and it just made me feel dull and sluggish. Just wasn't the right way for me. I just felt this rage rise up in me, but it was a righteous rage. It was just this sense of, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Depression was like a semi-autonomous thought form that would come into my life and just sweep me. It would take over my life. It would take over my emotions. It would take over my central nervous system, and I would be this very nervous, very weak man following my wife around the house like a puppy. I was so afraid, this sense of being afraid to be alive. I wasn't just afraid to go to work. It wasn't just afraid of change and all the things that we associate with depression. It was afraid to be alive.
Wow.
And this rage come up, and I just said, I'm not having this anymore. I am not going to have this entity come into my life and just take over and say, my name's depression. See you again next week. See you again in the morning. I'll be round at 4 o'clock in the morning. How you feel about that, Geoff? I'll wake you up with a cold sweat. I'll sit on your chest, and I'll make you feel as though you are worthless and that there is nothing worth living for. This was a nihilistic feeling that used to rise in me. And this rage came up with an idea straight away. And this is why, it's only in retrospect, I understood it was a communication of the soul. And it encouraged me to write down all of my fears on a piece of paper, on a pyramid. So I wrote my least fear on the bottom step and my worst fear on the top step. And I systematically started to confront my fears one by one. I decided to call all of my fears out and say, okay, step in, come into the house, sit down, have a cup of tea. This is my wife. Do you want to, stay as long as you want? So I just called them out, and one by one, I confronted my fears. I intercoursed with them. In other words, I absorbed 99% of the thing that I was afraid of. And to my surprise, the three-dimensional monster became a two-dimensional cartoon, and then it dissipated. So each time I overcame a fear, I got a little bit of desensitization to the body chemicals. I felt a bit more courage. Obviously, when I removed the fear, it was replaced by consciousness, by awareness. So my view expanded and it got clearer. And I just systematically climbed to the top of the pyramid. The top step of the pyramid was the fear of violent confrontation, a very reasonable fear, you probably would say, but I found it was debilitating in my life. Because at the time I was a black belt in karate, but that didn't help me because the karate I was learning wasn't practical. I knew it wouldn't work outside a kebab shop on a Friday night. It wouldn't work it wouldn't work in a bar on a Friday night. It just wasn't practical. It looked good in the dojo. It looked good when you watched it on screen and in the films, but it would not work in a real fight. And I knew that. And we all knew it. But all of us were invested in pretending not to see it because it was what we lived for. It's
like a choreographed dance, but not practical.
That's what it was. Yeah, it did not work against, a snarling monster outside a nightclub. So my final fear was a fear of violent confrontation. So I took a job as a nightclub bouncer to overcome that fear. And that was, as you said at the very beginning, my book, Watch My Back, is about what I learned from my experiences of working as a bouncer. It was Poland is one of the most violent cities in Europe for its size and population. So it's a violent place. 4 of my friends were murdered during the time I was working. So it was a real threat. In that environment, I wanted to understand martial efficacy. I also wanted to understand spiritual efficacy. Wanted to understand physiological efficacy. Could I manage my nerves in a violent confrontation? Could I manage my mind? Could I have sovereignty over this body? And what I realized is that what I learned in the dojo didn't work in the street, but most of the elements were there. What I needed to find efficacy was an environment that demanded nothing less than efficacy. So what I mean, you can't learn efficacy from the safety of a classroom. Arjuna Pandava, the king of the world in the Bhagavad Gita, he didn't learn to overcome his fear from a classroom. He learned to overcome his fear in the middle of the battlefield at Kurukshetra.
Right, there's theoretical and then there's experience. Absolutely,
yeah. Somebody said to me once, he was learning to climb rocks in a gymnasium, and he said, "Do you think it's just as good?" And I said, "No." He said to me, "Will learning self-defense in a dojo be the equivalent of learning how to defend myself on the street?" And I said to him, "Well, you like to climb, don't you?" He said, "Yeah, I'm a climber." I said, "Is climbing on a rock the same as climbing in a gym?" And he went, "Well, no, they're different experiences." So that's the parallel. If we go to the real environment, if we test the efficacy of what we've got in a real environment, the environment itself will shape us. It will teach us. It will come alive like a living spirit, and it will actually say, this guy wants to understand efficacy, so we'll teach him that. So people think that bouncing was a thug fest, but it was actually my first metaphysical experience. So I wasn't really guarding the nightclub door. I was guarding the doorway to my mind, the doorway to my heart, the doorway to my autonomic nervous system. It was the most amazing metaphysical experience of my life, but I didn't know it was a metaphysical experience until 20 years later. I didn't understand what I'd done. It took me 20 years to catch up, and to when I started to really, really immerse myself into spiritual practice, looking for the same efficacy. I thought I've done all this before. And of course I realized I'd learned it on the door. You know, the door demanded that I had sovereignty over this body and mind before I start trying to police a club. And what we see at the moment, you know, we see at the moment in all sorts of different worlds, we see lots of people who want to change the world, but they still can't change their waist size. You know, they want to transform the world, but they can't transform the image in the mirror.
Right.
So what efficacy is saying to us, and what the environment is saying to us, is this magic is real, but it's not real until you have certainty. So you have to be able to use that magic on this body. First of all, shape and control this body with the use of palate, what you eat, what you drink, what you ingest through any of the senses, what you read, the conversations you have. When you can control that, you can control this body. You are in some position to start helping other people. Otherwise, it's just broken people trying to fix other broken people.
Absolutely. When I was reading about those things in your book, and I thought the doorway, absolutely. I mean, it was so symbolic. The doorway to your life, the threshold into the metaphysical. And I always say to people, you know, our external is a reflection of our internal landscape.
Absolutely true.
That part of your book that talks about changing the person in the mirror is just beautiful, because, you know, especially with what's going on today, you know, I mean, from the pedophilia rings to Black Lives Matter to all the heated things on the external, I feel like it's so symbolic. I mean, if we look at, you know, what are we doing to ourselves right now? I mean, if you think about the ways that we are trafficking ourselves, how are we raping ourselves? How are we not staying true to ourselves? Absolutely, it goes back to us. You know, how are we not honoring ourselves? And then as far as the race wars, you know, or the political wars, how are we not accepting ourselves? How are we not, you know, listening to ourselves? How are we not listening to our inner child? All of those things come back to us and the self. So just like your book says, when I was reading those things, I was like, yes.
That's really insightful. It's one of the things that few people get. They don't realize that the work starts with you, and that it starts with the burnt offering. The burnt offering is where we consume the negative parts of our own persona in order to create light. You know, that's what we do. So when we're doing a conversation now, this is a burnt offering. This is both of us using our energy from our you know, from our animal soul, and we are creating sound. The Japanese call it kotodama gaku, the use of magic sound. We're creating sound that will hopefully go out and act as an intercession in people's lives. So but in order to do that, we have to consume the part of us that doesn't want to sit down and do this, that wants to go and have a beer, or sit and watch the telly, or play with the kids, or sit with the wife. The process of creation is uncomfortable. That's why they call it the burnt offering, or the animal sacrifice. So we have to sacrifice a part of ourselves, not just to serve other people, but also to understand what we know. I recognize that my deal with God is that I'll give you 98% of the information, but the other 2% will not trigger until you share it with other people. When you share it with other people, you will understand what you know, but you won't know what you know until you tell other people what you know. So when I talk to you, or if I talk to kids in prison, or if I write a book, anything where I feel that burn of discomfort is the burnt sacrifice that is enabling me to call in the 5 or 10% that I didn't get from my own study or from my own experience. So we never fully realize what we know until we share it with other people. So sharing with other people is very good for us. It's full of profit. In the Judaic tradition, they actually call these other people charity carriers. These people that we give our charity to, they allow us to offer our service in order that we might retrieve our knowledge. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that powerful?
So beautiful.
We think we're doing them a favor, but it's actually them doing us a favor.
Yes, it's a mutual healing as well.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you brought up the frequency of sound.
Yeah.
Because I think that in that burnt offering, I think that's so beautiful. And also, can you go into and explain, like in your first few chapters, about the topic and the theory of, and help me pronounce this, is it?
Eschatology.
Yeah, yes. Say it again.
Eschatology.
Eschatology. Thank you.
Eschatology, yeah.
Eschatology. Now, when I looked that up, it's a Greek word, and it's like the study of the last part, or either the end of the world or the last part of things. There's
the second coming of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah, there's like, so in the Christian canon, it's about the second coming of Christ, or the second coming of consciousness.
Yes.
And what it says is that the second coming of Christ in eschatology is that the second coming is within us. So it's not like another person it's not like Christ or a Christ figure returns again to redeem the earth. It returns in us. It actually alights in us. When we clean our body, when we align ourselves, we make ourselves a good vessel. We invite this energy in, this Christ energy. And the Christ energy, it's not like, they talk about Jesus Christ, but Jesus, it wasn't Jesus Christ, but Jesus was Christed. So the Christ is an energy. It's a bit like pouring a concentrated, like if you pour concentrated cordial into water, it becomes a soft drink. It's no longer cordial and it's no longer water. It's a bit of both. And that's what happens with the Christ energy. When the Christ energy enters us, we aren't Christ, but we're no longer human, but we are Christed. And to be Christed means to be magnified by 1,000 times, which is this concept of expansion, this concept of an expanded consciousness. So eschatology is saying that the second coming, Christ or the Buddha or Muhammad or Lord Krishna, any of the gods, Zoroaster, they would have been seen as the first coming of Christ or the Christ energy. They would have been the trailblazers, the pioneers, and they're saying the second coming of the Christ energy will be in you. That's your heritage, but you have to make room. We'll have to look at our body and go, yeah, I want that Christ energy, but and God says to us, we can have as much as we want, but you need to give something up. You need to make room. So we have to start to reclaim parts of ourselves that have been hijacked by habits or by opinions or by perceptions or by cognitions or specifically by beliefs. So we have to, so for me to make room for consciousness, for me to get a clearer view, I need to get rid of the obscurations. So that might be, if I've got a habit of smoking cigarettes and I remove that, when I remove that habit and kill the parasite in me that demands that habit, then I will make room and I will automatically expand in awareness. Even if the awareness is just that I know how to do that now. This concept that Masashi had, the samurai Masashi, to master one thing is to master all things, because the concept of mastering one thing is the same concept as mastering everything else. We make room for it and we expand. So this is what the Buddhists would call the clear view. We're looking for the clear view. In order to get the clear view, we get rid of all the things that are blocking the view. What are the things that are blocking the view? Well, I'm not jealous. I'm not angry. I'm not envious. I'm not greedy. I'm not jealous. I'm none of those things.
Sins.
Yeah.
as you
So if
talk
I
about.
start to get rid of those,
Yeah.
then if I start to eschew those, if I start to get rid of those, if I start to refuse them engagement in my mind, I will make room for consciousness. They call it, in the Christian mysticism, they call it apophatic theology, and it's about finding God or finding the self through negation. So in other words, we don't know what God is, but we know what he's not. I know he's not jealousy. I know he's not anger. I know he's not greed and envy. I know he's not violence. So if I can remove them from my life, they are the burnt offerings. They are what you have to consume. I will automatically reveal. The idea is not that you create consciousness, but you reveal the consciousness that is already there. And that's what eschatology is. Eschatology is saying it's already there. You are a multi-billionaire. You just haven't got the key. You haven't got the key or the combination to the lock. So by removing the parts of you that are non-virtuous or anti-consciousness, you will automatically get a clearer and clearer view. So this is about reclaiming the parts of ourselves, not trying to change the world while we still can't stop ourselves smoking cigarettes, not trying to change the world while we still can't stop ourselves from gossiping, not trying to change the world when we still can't manage our own body shape, not trying to change the world if we still can't control our central nervous system when we get a negative email or a negative phone call. We've got to be able to get ourselves into a position where we are impervious to the rush of passions. Not that they don't come, not that they're not there, but we start to recognize that this rush of passions is just oil for the lamp. If I'm able to control it, if I'm able to control it, I can consume that through this wick, through this body, and create light. But the stuff that most people run away from is the stuff we need to turn into.
Yeah, I love how you take scripture, whether it's through Christianity or other scriptures, and you just dig into the layers of the symbolism. I mean, like for instance, you take the Christian Bible and you just take baptism, for instance, and it's like the death and the resurrection, you know, going down into the grave and then the resurrection coming back up. There's life and there's resurrection. I mean, there's so much symbolism that you just parse out through your book. It's just so beautiful.
And you know, when you, oh, sorry to interrupt you, Jodi.
No, go ahead.
When you study the Old Testament, which obviously Christ and the New Testament came from the Old Testament, and the Holy Quran came from the Old Testament as well. It's the same lineage. When you look at the Old Testament and when you study the exegesis of that, the explanation of it, you know, like you go into Kabbalah and the Zohar and some of the very, very deep esoteric books, you start to even understand baptism at another level. So baptism, when you go through all of the text, I mean, the Zohar is 25 volumes. It's a massive investment of time, and it's esoteric. But when you start to look at it and you finish it and you piece it together, baptism, water, is representative of light. It's representative of knowledge. So it's saying that we are baptized and we are cleaned by a higher knowledge. It isn't literally water. Water is always a symbolism. So we are baptized by information, by knowledge, when we are able to take it in and absorb it. And the knowledge isn't just knowledge of this and that. It's knowledge of breath. It's knowledge of our ability to breathe in spirit. So when we breathe in, when we inspire, or the word breath comes from the word in spirit, and it means that when we breathe in, we literally breathe in prana or spirit. And if we're able to clean our body so that we can completely oxygenate ourselves, we can fully inhabit ourselves with spirit. And then when we speak, we release that spirit with magic sound into the world, and this sound can heal people. This sound can act as an intercession to take people in a better direction. And that's why me and you are doing this now, because we are bringing in spirit, and then we are sending out spirit with our breath, and we are sending it out as a healing force, literally as conscious sentient beings that we breathe out, that will start to heal people in the world. So the baptism is baptism by knowledge, not baptism by water, baptism by knowledge. And the knowledge specifically is the knowledge of the power of breath and the use of breath in Heka, which is the Egyptian word for magic sound, or Kotodama Gaku, which is the practice magic sound. And when you realize that you are using breath and that you are releasing spirit when you breathe, and that it goes out into the world of causation and creates, you become very, very careful about what you think and say and do. So I don't want to send out bad spirit with my talk, because not only is it going to go out there and create damage in the world, it's also going to return to me, because it's a reciprocal universe. So it makes you in awe of our own potential to create with sound.
So beautiful. I love that explanation. You know, it's funny because when I'm either in a shower or I have water coming down on my crown chakra, I get so much inspiration. So that's, I know, one of the reasons that water coming down, I just feel like there's inspiration. There's something about water.
Yeah. Well, everything contains,
also,
everything is living anyway. Everything is conscious.
Yes.
So the water, this computer, everything has got spirit in it. So, you know, and obviously water is very symbolic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I just love all of this. Now, there's something that you said. It says, the world is perfect as it is. It doesn't need saving, but we are the ones that can shift and change our paradigms and, you know, what we do. And that's basically what you did, is you shifted your paradigm and you created this completely different Geoff.
Yeah.
And there's different iterations that we create constantly within our journey. We have so many deaths, so many rebirths, so many resurrections. And I think it's so beautiful. So if we could kind of unpack that and break that down as you did in your book, like for instance, there's one specific part that when I read it last night, I was just in awe. And it talked a little bit about relationships and marriage even. And there was a point when you said, when you take enough time and you come to the judgment, so to speak, and you've really processed things and you've really reconciled things within, you know, whether it's you've thought about certain things, whether you've thought about, you know, the anger or the jealousy, all those things, you've unpacked that in your own life and you've really reconciled, like, how can I progress beyond that? Yeah. Or have I? Instead of taking it into your next relationship or your next life. And I thought, wow. And I actually just had this epiphany when it came to a relationship. And I thought, wow, I've progressed beyond that point, so that when you do, there's so much love, not only for that person and an understanding of a different sort. It almost reminds me of Byron Katie's The Work, because then you see things in a different light and you think, oh, I understand why they may have done something in that way. And when I take myself out of it, when I take that lens of jealousy or anger out of it, wow, you know, they may have been going through, you know, their own pain body or trauma body, or their lens through, you know, just all of that. And then you come out of it with so much love, and that judgment point is just so full of love. And then I feel like you're able to then progress on to your new life in a new way. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it's saying if you end a relationship and you don't own the mistakes you made and you project them all onto your partner, you just take those mistakes into the next relationship and they are reincarnated into the next relationship. The next relationship might start well, but it'll end up with all the same problems coming up because you haven't cleaned them. It's that blockage is still in the plumbing. So the idea from my first marriage was I stopped projecting about what my wife had done wrong and all that sort of blame. And I just looked and thought, I can't change her, but I can change me. So I looked at all of the things I did wrong, all of the things, and it was very painful. very, very painful to look at that, to see all the things I did wrong, to see how bad I treated her at times. When I got with Sharon, I just said, look, these are the mistakes I made in my first marriage. I made a lot, and I don't want to make them with you, but these are the mistakes. So they start to arise in this relationship. Just pull me on it. So what I did is I cleaned myself, and I, even for years after my relationship, my first relationship split up, I'd be ringing my ex-wife and just say, oh God, I said, you know, I've been working on myself, and I've just realized how unkind I was to you when I did this. When I said that, I was so unkind. I just wanted to say sorry. I'm not expecting you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know I did that. And I know I blamed you, and I know I probably drove you mad, making you think it was you. And I can't believe how, I mean, when I had my first epiphany, Jodi, for about 3 years, I was bumping into people and going, oh, I'm so sorry about what I said to you, about what I did to you. I saw a guy in the gym one day who I'd been very unkind to in a very subtle way. Nobody would have noticed, but I knew, and he knew. And I saw him in the gym, and I just felt such compassion. I felt such love for him. And I walked over, and he was with a load of other guys. And I had quite a big reputation, so I think he would have been nervous when I walked over. And I said to him in front of all these guys, I said, I was so unkind to you when I was in the factory. I said, please accept my sincere apology. I said, I was going through stuff and I didn't know what I was doing. It doesn't excuse it. I did it, and I just want you to know I'm truly sorry, and I hope you can forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I want you to know that I acknowledge I made that mistake. And he was overwhelmed. He wanted to shake my hand. It was an overwhelming moment because we met at the level of love. It was a very muscular, I take full responsibility for what I said to you, and I want you to know that I apologize. And I was in the room full of people that, you know, that really looked up to me because I was this fighter, Geoff Thompson. I was a bouncer, but I'd had this epiphany, and I suddenly was able to see all the things I did wrong. Like someone said to me the other day, Jodi, what does being woke mean? I said, being woke is painful, because when you wake up, you realize I'm awake. I'm the only one looking out of these eyes, but I am not in charge of this body because it's still doing unkind things. And it's done unkind things, and it's left me an inheritance, and I've got to try and pick those up and try and redress them. So being woke is painful. It's also exhilarating. It's also exciting because of the knowledge, but we can't move towards our refuge, towards our repentance, without going past all those dead bodies of our past. Yeah. So for ages, I was bumping into people and hugging them and saying, I'm so sorry. I sincerely apologize. But when you are genuine, when you genuinely do it from a place of truth, people accept it. So yeah, it was, so it just means that people don't realize that, you know, they say, is reincarnation real? Well, of course it is. People are reincarnating and reincarnating 20 times a day with this mood, with that mood, saying this and then not repenting it or not withdrawing it. You know, if we engage a negative emotion and we identify with it and we just think it's part of us and then we act on it, it can be said that we have been incarnated into a semi-autonomous thought form that takes over the driving seats of our consciousness for the amount of time that we engage it. Some people stay engaged in these bardo moments for years. I've known people that have been in a bardo for entire lifetimes. I've seen people change personalities just because somebody else has walked into the company, or just because they've taken one beer, or just because something's been said that's triggered something. But the gear change between personalities is so subtle, they don't even know they're doing it, but they are being, so say for instance, if we were talking and we were friends, and I suddenly got angry with you for some reason, you triggered something, and I went and I engaged an angry personality, and I said things to you. Not only have I been incarnated into an angry personality, that angry personality has left karma in the world, that when that angry personality withdraws, me, the caretaker Geoff, has got to deal with all the karma and all of the reciprocity that the angry person left. So you start to realize that people are being incarnated all the time. That isn't the most that isn't the most worrying thing. The most worrying thing is that they don't know. Now, the way to remedy it, this is what I learned from Gandhi, was the moment he fell into a negative personality, he would immediately confess it to someone around him. He had a habit of confessing it to his whole reader group. And some of the things he confessed were big things. At the level of sainthood, he was still making errors, and they were very dangerous errors for a man of his platform. But he would write about it in his newsletter, and he would tell 1 million of his followers, I made a mistake yesterday. And that would automatically clean it, because that would say to the sub-personality, I see you, and I know you're not me, and I know you've engaged me, you've tricked me, but I am going to put you into the light, and I'm going to consume you with confession. So we can still control it, but we have to recognize that until we connect and identify with our authentic self, we haven't got a geometric point. We haven't got the spot where we can build from. It's no good building from the enthusiastic personality or the depressed personality, because the enthusiastic personality is going to listen to our podcast and go, I'm going to start tomorrow. And then you wake up the next day and the animal, well, I'm going to get up at 5, and you wake up, they set the alarm for 5, and the animal soul goes, oh, I don't know, it's a bit dark still. And you'll go, no, we've got to get out there. The animal soul says, oh, no, it's a bit early yet. It's a bit cold. And then you argue back and forth. And eventually, of course, the higher soul wins, but it might not win till 10 o'clock. So it hasn't got up at 5 to do it. So we've got to know who's taking the information. Yeah, who is it that's listening? Who is it that's acting? In other words, who are we? The big Eckhart Tolle thing. Who am I? It's, So it's this concept of.
Geoff, sorry to interrupt you. What did your ex-wife say when you called her and just said, these are the things that I did. I was unkind to you. You don't have to forgive me. And that the gentleman, of course, in the gym wanted to shake your hand. How did your ex-wife respond?
Because I came genuinely from a place of love, she just accepted it. And she's been very gracious, my ex-wife. I made lots of mistakes. I made lots of mistakes for the first 40 years of my life. Mistakes that I've written about, some of them in CEO. I've got a book coming out soon called The Notes from a Factory Floor, which is pure burnt offering. It's all of my confessions. And I go into great detail about the mistakes I made. And I had a 10-year period of atonement, which was extremely painful. And again, I know this might not be recommending spirituality to people. I had 10 years of pain, but I'm saying my life was very violent. My life was very damaged. And you waking up probably won't be as painful. My waking up was painful because I suddenly looked at the debris in my path, following me like a wedding trail, So it's this sense that I woke up and for 2 years I was floating, nothing affected me. That was the honeymoon period. And then, of course, I had the realization that there are things in my past that I need to clean. And that's been my job ever since. But if I can do it as a man that was very violent and very damaged, it means it can be done by anybody. Anybody can repent. Anybody can return to the center. Anybody can find refuge. If you look at Angulimala, the Buddhist saint who had killed 999 people before the Buddha converted him. If you look at Milarepa, killed 35 people in a revenge attack before he was converted by his guru and found enlightenment in one lifetime. If you look at St. Paul persecuted Christians. He was a very dark guy before he had his epiphany on the road to Damascus. You look at Mandela. Mandela was a terrorist, and he spent 30 years in prison before he was able to see that love, compassion was the antidote. It's what it's saying is that the people who have the darkest past, who have done the most difficult things, have the most potential to create light. Because of course, the shadow that we carry is the oil for the lamp. So
and you point that out in your book.
Everybody. Yeah.
You point that out in your book that, you know, the darkest, lowest hell can actually be the potential to the highest heaven, basically,
Yeah.
you know, as above, so below type of thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're sitting in a prison cell and you're surrounded by walls and bars and guards, at some point you have to have the realization that this is me. I've put myself here. I've created this with my perceptions. And if I've created that, that tells me one thing: I can uncreate it. But I can't uncreate it till I start to acknowledge what I've done. If I'm still in a position where I'm blaming, I'm never going to get past it. The universe is patient, it, you know, unfolds over billions of years. So it's quite happy to wait for you. But it's, you know, what I'm saying, and I know what you're saying, is that the potential to awaken and the potential to for enlightenment is there for everybody all the time, irrespective of what they've done. In fact, often, as we said, the darker characters have more potential, because that's the prodigal son. He's going to come back and he is going to burn a lot of negativity when he creates his light.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, we hope this will go out to somebody who's sitting out there now who feels as though there's no redemption for him. There is. I'm absolutely certain of that. Certainty is an attribute of God. In Islam, they call it yaqeen. It means the truth is undeniably right in front of you. It's one of the 99 names of Allah from the Quran, yaqeen. It means certainty. If you're out there now watching this, I am certain that you can repent and you can redeem and you can find refuge. I am certain, because I've done it. I'm certain of it. So that's why I do this. That's why I do talks and write books, to say to those kids out there who have been told by society that it's over for them. It's not over. It's never too late. You're never too old. You've never done too many bad things. You just need to find the refuge, the return, the repair. There's lots of different names for repentance. Repentance sounds quite dogmatic, doesn't it? But it actually just means to return.
Yeah.
In Buddhism, they say that we have the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. The Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the teaching or the law, and the Sangha is the community. We have a community here, don't we? So when people return to the teaching, when they return to the teacher and to the teaching and to the community of love, they are in refuge.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. I'm so glad that you are out there teaching this. This is just such gold. It's such a treasure. It's such wisdom. You know, part of my atonement and part of the epiphany I had just a couple days ago in relationship, I wrote down, you know, because part of my story for so long was, you know, I was never really in love with him. I settled. And when I had that epiphany, I wrote down, I didn't realize I loved him until I could love myself. And that was getting rid of all the obscuration, like you talked about. Yeah. And it was painful because I realized all of the unkind things that I had done too.
It's hard to look at.
Oh, it was. And I just started crying and I was like, oh my goodness, wow, you know? And that's when the love came in and took over and I was like, wow, it's actually really beautiful, because then when you have love as your guide, it really becomes quite phenomenal. Yeah. And you realize so much, and it actually takes you to a higher place. And there's so much realization. And you actually talk about this in The Divine CEO, where just you having that repentance process, which is, you know, turning back and back to the mark, which is the way, you know, and that pebble, like a drop in the pond, has that ripple effect. Yeah. And not only do you change your life, but you change those around you. And I believe that it also has an effect on your familial lineage. Yeah. And it can really change so many lives.
Everything you do affects everything. Leonardo da Vinci said that when a bird lands in a tree, the whole world changes, because everything affects everything. And of course, I mean, I've never heard it said like that. That's very, very eloquent, but it's very true that when we change ourselves, we do change our lineage, because what we do will affect, of course it was going to affect our son, our daughter, our family, our future. Of course it is. And that's why the world is relying on us to recapture ourselves. It's relying on us to reclaim ourselves. It's relying on us to get ourselves balanced, because the world won't change if we don't change. Otherwise, it's like sitting in a cinema and looking at the screen, and suddenly the screen looks, maybe the screen spins, or it's at an angle, and we go and try and fix the picture from the screen. You can't fix it from the screen. You have to go back to the projector. You have to go to the film in the projector. The light coming through the projector is perfect. It only gets distorted when it comes through the images on the film that goes before the light. So if we want to change what's on the screen of our life, we have to change what's on the projector, what's on the film, which is our perceptions, our conceptualizations, you know, our beliefs. We have to challenge those. We have to make them qualify themselves, because they do create the reality around us. And that's what eschatology says. The reality will be whatever you want it to be. The potential is there. It's already there. Same as consciousness. We don't create consciousness. We just reveal it. It's already there. You know, we don't create God. We don't create the soul. It's already there. It is the only constant. And as we start to remove the obscurations, it reveals itself a little bit at a time. And that's what we would call moments of clarity, epiphanies, and we can work for that actively. We can't guarantee, as Richard Rose says, we can't guarantee that we're going to get it. We can only, because we know it's a happy accident. All we can do is do all the things we know that will make us accident prone. That's what we can do. This is what we continue to do. And the big part of that is what you're doing now, teaching and passing on seeds that will go out, seeds of wisdom that will go out to people, and it will be working on people and their lineage in ways that we could never, ever fathom. It would be impossible to fathom, but they are there and they are working. Some kid's going to wake up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat, depressed, not able to go on, and he will be able to access me and you talking and say, these are like me, these people are like me, because truth speaks. And the more certain we are when we speak, the more spirit we bring through. People will hear that. It won't even be about the articulation. It will just be about the sound entering them as food and feeding them and acting as an intercessor. I had an encounter with two angels, two proper angels, when I was in Edinburgh. I was up in Edinburgh, and we were doing a very powerful film with Orlando Bloom about the metaphysical power of forgiveness. And after the film, it was a very, very challenging film, because it's what I like to call muscular spirituality. It's real, but you've got to do a lot of work. And afterwards, a young couple come up to me, and you know you've met an angel or someone from that realm when there's something, but you can't quite figure it out. It's only afterwards. That's what God always says. You won't know me while I'm there. You will only know me after I've gone. And they spoke to me about the film and asked me about the film, because I was talking about reciprocity and the power of forgiveness. And he said, your film, Geoff, is an intercessor. And I thought, that's a biblical term. I've never heard anyone say that before. Your film is going to go out. He said, what was your intercessor? And I told him about the time I'd stood in front of a man that abused me, and I forgave him. And it was the beginning of me reclaiming my stolen soul. And I said, this man that abused me acted as an intercessor, because I was able, when somebody abuses you, they steal something from you. They take your light and they replace it with the parasite of darkness. And over time and space, they feed from that. Every time you think of them, even in their absence, you're flooded with adrenaline, you're flooded with emotion, you're flooded with dissonance. So they feed off you over time and space. It's because they've stolen a part of your soul and they've replaced it with a piece of ignorance. When you see them again, you have the opportunity to retrieve that soul and give them back their darkness. So this guy was an intercessor for me. So he was my abuser, but he became an intercessor. He didn't even know it, obviously. So he said, your film is an intercessor. It's going to meet people at a point in their life when they could go one way or another, and this is going to take them in the right direction. They might be thinking, vengeance, I need revenge for the people that have hurt me. And your film is saying, if you want revenge, stop pretending that you have the power to pardon people. Stop pretending that you have the ability to forgive. You don't. It's not a human trait. That is a divine attribute. Instead, give them over. Give them back to reciprocity. Let the law take care of them, and you do the one thing you do have the power to do, which is return to goodness, repent, return to the center. And there was loads of people trying to talk to me. We had to go and do lots of talks, and as you can imagine with a film. So these two kids were pulled away from me very conveniently, but they said what they needed to say. And it was the first time I realized, I used to say to people, if I can forgive somebody that's abused me, it will give other people permission to find the same power. But I'd never actually articulate it in the sense of as an intervention, an intercessor. So they left that gift with me. But I only was able to get that gift because I went to Edinburgh, and I didn't want to go because I was nervous about standing in front of an audience with this very, very personal biopic about being abused and about how it damaged me and about forgiveness. It's a very tricky subject. But I went because I felt drawn to it. And when I did a talk afterwards, that was my burnt offering. I consumed the fear and made space for this message from these two angels who said, this is what your films do. This is why it's important. And you don't get the information until you tell people what you know. You won't know what you know until you tell them. So I have that happen to me all the time. All the time, there's beautiful things. So yeah, it's an intercessor, and that's the best we can hope for.
Absolutely. And like you said, I feel like it's a certain frequency that's shared, and it touches people, it resonates with people, and it's like a soul to soul interaction. And then the divine comes in, the divinity within them and the divine, everything just aligns, and there's just something that happens. And
It's miraculous. We have the ability to intercourse spiritually with everybody on the planet without them even knowing. And it doesn't need to be consummated, it doesn't need to be mentioned. Well, I had epiphany recently when we did a musical in Coventry, and it was based around the Bhagavad Gita. And when we were doing the screen in London, I had a lot of difficulty getting there again. There was a lot of things came up that I had to consume in order to get there. Lots of fears and doubts. But when I got there, I had this moment of clarity where I was able to see that we can the right word is intercourse, and I know it has other connotations, but it's not sexual in any way. It was just a matter of exactly what you said. Something you said triggered it, that we can communicate on a pure level, at a level of love to love, soul to soul, but only if we get rid of the lower ego, and if we get rid of the obscurations. We have to get out of our own way. And I was able to see that, because what happened when we were doing the casting for the play, and these kids were coming out, like from a 17-year-old kid right to a 70-year-old man, because it was a 9-part cast. And I just thought, blimey, these people are absolutely surrendering everything. And I could feel this exchange of energy between all of us. People were crying, people were emotional. I went and meditated afterwards, and I was told, you can intercourse spiritually with everybody on the planet at any time, and it doesn't need to be mentioned or consummated. The idea of anything being consummated, not that consummation is wrong, but consummation will reduce it. If you want it at its purest level, just notice the soul in yourself. You'll automatically notice the soul in others, and you will all of you will be connecting at a level that doesn't need to be spoken. And the moment you speak it, you reduce it. And the moment it becomes physical, it's reduced again. Again, doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that its purest form, it's telepathic. It doesn't need to be spoken. But I felt it. At one point, I felt love. pouring from my fingers. And I knew that anything I touched would feel it. Anybody I touched would feel it. And the people that we were talking to that night were dissonant when they were talking to me, because they felt that energy through me. But it was because I got my ego out of the way and made room for it. And this energy was saying to me, you can do this whenever you want, anytime you want. This is accessible now. This is your heritage. This is a backboard to this whole great earth. So the aim is to continue to find that, not to see people as a personality or an ego, you know, or something like, you know, something abstract. We look at them as a soul, despite all of the things that might be at the front. If we can access our soul and know we're a soul, we automatically know they are as well. And then we can access them at that level. And everything then melts, everything. You know, that lovely poem by Rumi, when he said, fear knocked on the door, love answered, there was no one there. It's that sense that love transcends everything. Compassion transcends everything. And people have an idea that it's a soft option for a hard problem. It's not. I think Rumi said again, love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. Because of course we have to devastate the ego in order to access love. Because love is the soul.
Yeah.
So when people say it's a soft option, it's dream catchers, you know, it's socks and sandals, it's hugging trees, it's actually the most muscular thing you will ever do, because it demands work. I think Gurdjieff said, conscious labor, deliberate suffering. We have to consume the parts of us that aren't in alignment with that. So, but that's the work, isn't it, as we said. And was it Byron Katie you mentioned earlier?
Yes.
She's a master of the work, isn't she?
Yeah.
She's really amazing.
And in fact, your poem at the beginning of The Divine CEO kind of reminds me of that flavor you're talking about, that tone, where, you know, love and just consciousness and spirit, all of that aligning with the divine, it's in everything, you know? I mean, whether it's
starting to see it,
whether it's the devastation or the love, or, you know, the brightness or the darkness, it's in everything. It encompasses everything, because the shadow or the light, it's the whole of everything.
Yeah.
You know? And it's going to allow us to rise into our authentic self.
Yeah.
And just be and to become. And that also reminds me of, in the book, you talk about the divine present moment and being in that, rather than being in, you know, whether it's the future or the illusion of the past, and fluctuating in either or, to concentrate on being in the divine moment, which I think is beautiful.
It's absolutely true as well. And again, it's, you know, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. You have to train like an athlete to do that. Yeah. Before you can hold yourself in the now, you have to know who is it that's holding themselves. I have to know who I am. The moment I know who I am, I know what my work is. Because the moment I wake up and know who I am, I look around and I go, yeah, I know who I am. But I'm in a life that's got lots of litter. I've left lots of problems because of when I was asleep. So we have to start tidying that up. To keep yourself in the present moment, you have to know who you are. And then you have to be able to observe all of the other phenomena around you and not engage it. Reality exists at the level of engagement. So we stop engaging every passing thought. We stop engaging every passing fancy. We stop giving life to every negative thought that rises or approaches. We start to recognize that in the still center is peace, is calm, it's the eye of the storm. And everything other than that is outside. It isn't, the thoughts aren't coming in, they're not coming from us. They're coming from outside of that still center. And if we can access that still center through our work, through our meditation, then we can just be the observer of phenomena. We can deconceptualize it. So if you look at all energy as just neutral energy with a potential to build from, you know, so when everything is neutral, we can do something with it. What we do is we conceptualize in energy. The concept gives it a form. The form gives it an aspect. So if I conceptualize John Smith as a violent man, then he becomes the form of a violent man with the aspect of violence against me. But it's only a conceptualization. If I'm able to kill that if I'm able to break that down to its constituent parts, it's just an energy form which is neutral until I give it a concept. It's a very difficult thing to get your head around, even more difficult to do, but it's starting to look at the world as energy, and strip away the concepts. If you put anger, fear, write them on a board: anger, fear, jealousy, rage, envy, greed. If you write them on a board, I did this with a group of addicts when I was working at an addiction centre. I was like a patron, and I said, what have all those words got in common? Nobody was really seeing. I said, they're just energy. I said, if you deconceptualize rage, what is it? It's just a raw energy. It's just oil for the lamp. I can, if I've got the wherewithal, I can take that energy, instead of it rising up and creating karma in the world, I can let it rise up. I can clean it, deconceptualize it, or denotation, the Buddha calls it, and I can create something beautiful from that. So am I going to burn a building down with my petrol, or am I going to use it to power my car? That's what I'm saying. So the idea is that if we're able to look at the world just as phenomena, and just as potential, then any energy that comes into our life is ripe for the conversion. Any energy is ripe for the conversion. First of all, we have to find out who we are. We have to be certain about who we are. We have to be able to locate that center, and whenever we fall out of alignment, bring ourselves back to the geometric point. Otherwise, the geometric point might be a jealous personality that builds the whole reality on the basis of fear. It might be a greedy personality. It might be a personality that's been abused and sees the whole world as a threat. That's what happened to me when I was a kid. I was given the wrong conception, the wrong perception, and the wrong conception about the world by a damaged teacher at the age of 11. And every day from that day onwards, every decision I made was influenced by that fear. So by the time I was in my mid-30s, I was a powerful physical martial artist, extremely violent. I was extremely violent in Coventry. Of course, I rationalized what I did, but it was wrong. And I recognized through the metaphysical experience that all the monsters I saw on the door, the queues of people that came to fight me, were all projections from that wrong perception. When I was able to see that, I was able to deconceptualize it, and I was able to bring it back to a neutral energy. And instead of having fights on nightclub doors with projected monsters, I was writing 50 books, 15 films, 5 stage plays. I was doing a musical. You know, I was creating the most beautiful things, not with a new energy, with the same energy, brought up, projected out through a controlled vessel. That's amazing. That's worth getting up in the morning for, isn't it?
Yeah, that's amazing. In fact, that's where I want to kind of touch upon. I know we're kind of running out of time, but I want to break some things down, because for some of my audience, I know this gets really abstract and we're talking in some abstract ways, but I want to break a couple things down. When we say the term Bardo, we're talking about a Tibetan Buddhist term. And if you could break that down for us a little bit. And then if we could also talk about, you know, some practical ways that people can go from shifting from getting out of maybe a process of thinking in a, you know, fearful manner to getting into, okay, this is who I am. I'm not that fearful person. I'm not that addict. I'm not that jealous person, into this is who I am. You know, I get up every morning and I channel my energy into these things instead. Because I think sometimes people say, oh, that's easier said than done, Geoff and Jodi. You know, how do I take these steps to actually do this? You know, those are all beautiful things you're saying, but how do I actually do it? So
well, our message is exactly that, isn't it? That it is hard. We're not saying it's easy.
Right, exactly. This has taken me years to get where I am.
Yeah, it's a lifetime. It's something that takes a lifetime, and it's compound. You know, you improve every time you meditate. There's a compound interest. Every
Yeah.
time you resist an addiction, there's a compound interest.
Right.
So it's a continuous thing. So the thing I'm saying to people is that it's possible, but it's not probable, because most people don't want to do the work, but it's possible. And that it's very difficult. It'd be the most difficult thing you've ever done. So prepare yourself for that and expect that. It will be painful because you will be consuming the negative parts of yourself in order to build this new reality. So the bardo is the place that we end up when we're engaged by something. If we're engaged by a dark mood and we're in that dark mood, whatever the emotion is, for 6 hours or a day or whatever, we are in a place of bardo. We have been incarnated into something, and we're in a place where we're not ourselves. You know how people will say, I know I did that, but I wasn't myself. You know, I was out of character. That's not like me. I don't know who that was. I don't know why I did that. It's because it wasn't them. It was a part of it was a part of a pain body that rises up that they engaged without realizing it. So they let the vampire across the threshold without realizing they've done it, because they just think it's an aspect of their personality. And it's not. There is only one you, and that's in the very center. So the job is to find that part of you. And the first thing I would say to people is, if you want to find out who you are, this is very practical. Start by looking at who you're not. You've got to be honest. You've got to admit it. You've got to say, when I act like that, and look at anything in your life that you would consider to be unkind, and start from now not doing it anymore. Every time it rises up and tries to engage you in gossip, to engage you in negative judgment, to engage you in unkindness, when you refrain from that emotion, you're starving that pain body. You're starving that semi-autonomous thought form. So the first thing is to do is be kind. Because don't forget, if you're unkind to other people, if you're judgmental to other people, you are feeding the parasite in you that feeds off pain, that feeds off drama. So if I'm unkind to you, it means I have to process all of those negative emotions in every cell of my body before I project it to you. If I'm kind to people and I'm giving to people, of course I have to process all of that goodness in me before I give it out as well. So I'd say make a little list of the things that you know aren't kind, and just stop doing them. Also, I always advise people, this magic is real, it works, but can you work it on your own body? Are you working it on your own body? Take your clothes off, look in the mirror, and immediately look at yourself objectively, not judgmentally, objectively, and say, okay, where on my body is there an excess of energy that I could be consuming to create something beautiful? So first of all, if you want to, you know, Aesop's fable of the turtle, don't try and learn to fly while you still can't walk on the earth. So this sense of get your palate right. It's the most basic thing, and it's linked to all spirituality, because once we get the palate right, once we get the food right, the senses start to fall into line. When we get control of the sensual body, we get control of the self. We get introduced to the self. Once we are introduced to the self and we have control of the self, then we have control of our world. So it's about recognizing that there are two souls in you, an animal soul and a higher soul, and they are battling with each other all the time. That's why we have this constant to and fro. So what we have to do is recognize that anything that is not kind, do not do it, because it's a karmic thing that you automatically leave the debt in your body and you automatically create negativity in the world. That's something, it's very difficult to do, but it will start by when you're at work tomorrow or when you're with your friends. Stop looking at the easy targets and stop tearing them apart. Stop, you know, what I always say is hate is bait. Don't allow any kind of rationalized hate into your body, even if it's for some big projected, you know, prime minister or president who is easy to hate. It's very easy, but where does that hate sit? In us,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So we've got to, we don't want to carry a banner against hate. We just want to carry a banner for love. So if somebody out there who is obviously being hateful, if they're obviously being hateful, then it's my job to be twice as kind, to be twice as nice. I can't change what he does out there. I can't change what she does over there, but I can change what I do. So every time they're loose on their morals, I tighten up on my morals. Every time they're unkind, I'm twice as kind. Every time they're greedy, I'm twice as generous. I look at it and I go, that is not how I'm going to be. I'm going to put out goodness into the world, and I'm going to create merit from doing that. So I would say, although again, in the spiritual community, people don't tend to associate palate with anything to do with the spiritual progress. But it's just logic. If we can't even control our own food, how are we going to control the metaphysical stuff, which is a tremendous surge of energy that will completely wipe you out if you haven't built the infrastructure? You should never wish to be enlightened or woke if you're not ready for it, because the energy rush, and I had one last year after a section of cleaning that nearly wiped me out. It was this surge of Kundalini was so powerful, and I'd had predictions it was coming. I've been shown, but man, it took every element of my experience and my ability to surrender to the higher force to be able to get through it. And I was given all of the right medicine, all of the right books, all of the right material to look at and to work. But I still had to do the work, Jodi. I still had to sit down and read the Zohar. I still had to sit down and write my book. I still had to go out and do my work. I still had to sit in that discomfort and keep reminding myself, this pain is not my pain. This burn is not my burn. This is the ego being burned up. This depression is the pain body being burned up. And I'm going to create something beautiful with it. So we should never rush for any kind of Kundalini moment. And we should make sure we do all the work we can to make sure, you know, that, like I said, if we can't control the mundane world, if we can't control our palate, if we're still not, you know, in control of, you know, the things that go on in our own household, we shouldn't be wishing to try and bring magic into our life. We should deal with the magic we've got, and then we can build upon layers. So the first magic is, when I look in the mirror, I want to see that the person looking back at me is the shape he needs to be practicing it at this level. I need to be a living example of it. And I know that because for a long time I wasn't. When I got my 5th dan in karate many years ago, which is a master grade, I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, I'm not a master of anything. All I can do is have a fight. I couldn't control my food. I couldn't control my jealousy. I had an addiction to sexual pornography. These are all embarrassing things, but it's very true. I couldn't even control my body weight. And I thought, there's no master looking back at me. But as one of my friends and teachers said to me, sometimes we get upgraded not for what we've done, but for what we've been asked to do.
Ooh,
so I immediately started to work on myself. I lost about 4 stone, and I got rid of the addictions. I went to war with my addictions, and I contracted my ego rapidly. And in contracting, I expanded. I contracted my ego and I expanded my conscious net because I reclaimed all those places. So coming back to what we said, get your food right. What you watch on the television, the conversations you have is food. It goes in and it becomes flesh. Of course it's food. So anything that comes in through the senses, if it's not wholesome, you know, if it's not coming from a place of love, if it's not going to get me to heaven, as they say, don't take it. So they're practical things you can look at. If you're looking at violent films, you're feeding on pornography. If you're sitting and gossiping, you're feeding on pornography. You're feeding on the character assassination of somebody else, no matter how much we want to rationalize it. If we're eating too much, we're not keeping our vow. If I'm eating too much food, I'm bringing in energy, which is living autonomous, semi-autonomous energy, but I'm not creating with it. I'm storing it in the body. It doesn't need to be stored. It needs to be brought in, and we need to use it as the building blocks for creation. So we have to really start being strict with ourselves and go, let's be honest. If I want to change the world, I need to start by changing myself.
I love the way that you said all of that, because really it's practicing being a creator. You're orchestrating energy, you're orchestrating the little things in your life and how to manage them. So that
that's absolutely true.
As a creator, you can say, okay, I can manage this in my life, so that then I can take on larger and greater responsibilities and then in the metaphysical realms, and then the spiritual realms, and then other realms outside of this realm. So I think that's beautiful. Start with yourself. Start with the little things that you consume, with your food, with what you watch, all of that. I think that's wonderful. Another quick question is, when we talk about fear, some people say, like in that book, The Gift of Fear, that it could be a good thing because, you know, you are trying to discern if someone is going to hurt you or attempt to kill you possibly. But then there's fear that you want to get out of your life as well. And that's what blocks you from expansion and, you know, of course, your enlightenment. So where can people differentiate and how?
Yeah, so some of the fears you need to consume, that when they rise up, you need to be able to consume them and create your reality with it. Because if you're going to do anything, anything out of the ordinary with your life, you're going to bump into fear, and the fear is that pain body rising up saying, "Don't do this," and it doesn't want you to do it because its whole reality is going to be consumed by it. So when I, for instance, I write a book, you know, my pain body doesn't want me to do that, because when I write a book, I'm going to tell the truth, and the truth will act as a caustic to that part. And actually that part of me will be consumed in the volition of writing the book. So we've got to know the difference between anabolic fear and catabolic fear. Catabolic fear is when something is bad for us. You know, we've got to, if we're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, fear can be very good. It can, and you know, if there's a hot stove, fear will remind us not to go near it. So we have to be aware that some fears are there to protect us. Some fears are catabolic, and if we don't consume them, they will consume us. So if I listen to, like, for instance, my brother was a great creative man, great writer, going to change the world. And he got into a habit of drinking when he was younger. Got into a couple of things he did triggered his drinking and made it worse. And he started to get a lot of anxiety and fear. And he made the mistake, and this is what he taught me when he died. He made the mistake of listening to catabolic fear, to negative fear, and he let it consume him. So my brother went from this person that was going to change the world to a person that wouldn't leave his hallway in a tiny little flat in a negative part of our city. And he died at the age of 42, leaving 4 children. And they said on his death certificate, alcoholic, but he died from fear, Jodi, because he listened to fear. So when he died, I demanded that he teach me. I spoke to him in my spirit and demanded that he teach me what he'd learned. And he said, do not listen to fear, because fear will shrink you. It rises to claim or be claimed. So we have to claim it. But we can't ignore the fact that some fears, some things need to be run away from. If a guy's coming at you with a knife, that's a healthy fear. Run away. You know, if you've got an instinct that a business transaction isn't right, listen to that fear. So the discernment comes. The discernment gets clearer and clearer the closer and closer you become in proximity to your own self. So the closer you are to yourself, the more that discernment will become clear. So you will have a loud voice that's saying, "Don't go there, don't do it. Ring them up now and cancel it straight away." And that will be the fear that needs to be consumed. You'll have a quiet little voice that will say to you, "Listen to this, watch this, be careful about that." So discernment is not something I could give somebody in a sentence, but I would say to them that the more you contract the ego and the more you expand your conscious awareness, the more keen that discernment will become. You will develop acoustic clarity with your intuition, and you will just learn to know. You will just know. That is one of the siddhis. That's one of the gifts. That comes from the work.
I love that. Acoustic clarity. That's beautiful. Yes. And then the last question that I have for you is, when people say, I exude kindness, I exude love in my life, in my work, but people take that as weakness. People take advantage of that. What do I do? I've had people say that to me.
Yeah, well, if it's coming from a true place, no one can take advantage of kindness or compassion, because it's absolute. It is an absolute. It'd be like trying to take on the whole universe. So when we're talking about kindness as an attribute of God, as a name of God, or when we're talking about compassion as an attribute or a kindness of God, we're talking about God. If it's an attribute of God, if it's a name of God, and that's one of the siddhas, when we have certainty, God has placed one of his attributes in us. So that certainty will have God in it, that compassion will have God in it, and people just won't be able to take advantage. But who do you think is asking that question when they say, people will take advantage of me? That's the shadow speaking. The shadow is saying, let's not go there. Let's not look at that, because everybody knows. It's just a basic house ghost. The house ghost says, don't go there. People will take advantage of you. Well, people will take advantage if you let them, but you don't let them, because your certainty will be so strong. They will know. They will just work. They will walk into truth, and they will back away, because truth is caustic to shadow. Will absolutely dissolve it. You know, it would be like shining a lamp on a shadow. It will just be dissipated. It won't have no existence. So I would say that those kind of complaints or questions or fears are house ghosts. They're trying to stop you from going deeper, because the shadow recognizes that when we start to do the work, he is the fuel. He's the oil for the lamp. He's the one that's going to be consumed. But it's not a negative thing, because when we consume a shadow, the effulgence, the energy that's in the shadow comes over to us, and the negativity is transcended, it's liberated. So that any negative elements are liberated. So we do a great service to any kind of shadow elements when we convert them to light. If I could say our main job, our only job when we are here, while we are here, is to convert the physical into the spiritual. And we do that by consuming anything that comes into a life that is negative or even neutral. We can take it, we can use it, we can create kindness with it. And the discernment, I know the discernment is a big issue with people, and it was with me, but the discernment, I call it the divine sword in the divine CEO. Discernment is the siddha, or the gift you get, or the gift of seeing you get as you get a wider access to consciousness. I wouldn't say that as you expand your conscious net, but as you reveal your conscious net. So you start to be able to see masks, you see agenda, you see people that are unkind. And if they are able to take advantage of you, send them a check. They're your teacher. They're showing you where there's a gap in your fortitude. They're showing you that you're still people pleasing. You're afraid to say no. Yeah. So they're good for you. Anybody that's able to climb through your armor is a teacher. As much as we dislike them, and as much as we're angry at them, they've shown us a gap. So they're our teachers.
Yeah, I was just going to say also, what I mention to people when they say that to me is there's still ways to show love and kindness with boundaries, with healthy boundaries, instead of being codependent. And you may need a coach, or you may need a guide or a therapist to help you navigate those things, but you still can show love and kindness in a healthy way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's this sense that sometimes the best way we serve people is to say no. Sometimes that's the kindest thing to do. It doesn't mean we say yes all the time.
Right.
You know, the kind side of our nature in Judaic, on the Judaic tree of life, they would call it Hesed, which is kindness. It just wants to give and give, but it has to be balanced by the opposite side, which is Gevura, which is judgment, severity. So we have to balance kindness with severity. In other words, we have to know when to give kindness and how much to give. It doesn't mean that we can completely just keep giving, because that would disable people. If we were to just keep giving people kindness, it would, like you say, codependency. I've seen people in my own life who have become completely debilitated because people don't know when to stop giving to them, because they think it's a kindness. Actually, it's not a kindness, it's the opposite. So we have to balance kindness with severity. In other words, we have to know how much kindness to give, when to give it. Should I speak to this person for 5 minutes or for an hour? Or should I have him in my life for 5 years? Or should I not speak to this person at all because this person is not at the moment on the right frequency to hear what I've got. My energy to serve is very precious. And when I put it out there, it needs to work. It needs, I think in the New Testament, they call it the parable of the talents. The talents need to go out and they need to work and bring back profit. That's what we do. So if I'm going to put that to somebody that's just going to keep taking it but not doing anything with it, or if I'm giving it to someone that's not asking for it, or if I'm giving it to someone that's not ready for it, or if I'm giving it to someone that's ready for it but I'm giving them too much, then it's not going to come back with any profit at all. It's like I've just wasted my energy. This is something I had to learn the hard way as well. I was so overwhelmed when I had my first wake up. I wanted to give everything to everybody all the time. And my wife was saying to me, Geoff, that taxi driver didn't ask you about how he can change his life. You should have listened to his response, because he doesn't want to hear you're frightening him. And she was so right. She was just saying, or I'll talk to somebody and say, Geoff, you're talking to people about miracles and they're still struggling with their diet. You've got to reduce it a little bit and listen to what they want. I says, because when you were talking about physical, practical things, they were listening. The moment you started to talk about manifesting things, they looked like like you'd just grown a second head. They looked like a spaceman. So I started to learn how precious my energy was, and how I should only give it to the degree that I'm asked to give. And that's about intuition again. Intuition will say, talk, stop. Talk for a longer time, just talk for a little bit. Push, yield. Move forward, move back, stay still. The intuition is a divine sat-nav. It tells you exactly, it gives you exact instructions, but only if we listen to it. So we just have to learn how to deliver kindness at the right amount. Kindness, where they say we will kill them with kindness. It's actually true. Kindness is in energy, and it's that's why they say if you're very kind to your enemies, they shouldn't be thanking you. They should be running away from you, because kindness will overwhelm them. Because when you give kindness to people that have abused you, you automatically take back off them what they've stolen, and you give them the hot coals of their negativity, and it consumes them. So kindness does kill people, but it can kill people that we love as well. So we have to measure our kindness. We have to have the wisdom to be able to go, that's enough kindness. Even with my own children, and my youngest daughter was going, she won't mind me talking about this, but when she was going through some financial problems, I knew she had the ability to earn the money. I knew that she said this herself, she's fallen into a place where she just lost her discipline. So I didn't give her the money to solve a problem. I gave her some things that we'd got spare that she could sell. And she was in a position where she felt she couldn't do anything. And I gave her some stuff. My other kids gave her some stuff. Some of her friends gave us just stuff they didn't want anyway. And she was able to raise enough money to buy 3 holidays for her and the kids.
Wow.
But if I had have just given her it, I wouldn't have allowed her to find the ability to actually create commerce. So she went on one of the websites online, and she's very, very good at selling. So I gave her some stuff that she could sell. She made some money, and she solved the problem. I said, now what have you learned? You've learned how to make money. You've learned how to create. You've learned the parable of the talents. You've taken a small amount of energy and you've expanded it. You can do that whenever you want now. That's the gift. So I've not going to keep feeding the fish. I'm just going to teach you how to fish. So it's learning to measure that, because there may be times when you have to give somebody money because they're in such a dark place, or you may have to carry them for a little bit. We have to be careful that we don't do it too much, because like I said, it consumes energy that does not return.
I had to learn that lesson as well.
Me too. It's painful, isn't it?
Geoff, this has been so delightful. You are just wonderful. And I have enjoyed your book, and I would love to have you back on Guided again.
Yeah, I'd love to come on. Thank you. Just call me anytime. Just shout me.
This would be wonderful. Now, for those of you who have not read The Divine CEO, it is a must. It is packed with just treasures of wisdom, and I would invite you to do so. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do. Guided, helping you navigate your divine journey, and press the bell and that indicates all, so then you can make sure that you get all of these amazing interviews, like with Geoff Thompson. And also, Geoff, you have this launch coming up July 31st, and it will be on Mind, Body, Soul. Is that right? I'll have it in the description.
Yeah. The best thing for me, if they want to look at my stuff, is I'm doing something with Colin Holland on the 31st, but that's his launch. And he's got a great book out called The Secret of Alchemy. The Secret of the Alchemist. And it's a wonderful book. But if they want to look at my stuff, they could go to Geoff Thompson Official on Instagram. So it's Geoff_Thompson_official. And that's the only presence I have on the internet. That's my only presence. But all of my new work and all the links to the films and the books I've written, they're all on there. So it's a comprehensive place to go. We're still building it at the moment, but my friend Gabriella runs that for me. So if they want to have a look at any more of our stuff, they can go on to there.
Excellent. We will make sure to do that. I'll put all of this in the description. And also, I will be speaking just a quick little bit at the launch. So I'm excited for July 31st. And I have interviewed Colm as well. So I will have both of you back on Guided. I'm so excited. So thank you again so much, Geoff. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jodi.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.